Hey everybody, welcome back to the Black and Rowdy show. It's so good to see all of you. Again, I appreciate all of your support. I'm so grateful to see so many views, different videos with views and like YouTube, and I just appreciate everyone's support there. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So there's so many thoughts in my head right now after coming back from a protest. But right now, we're going to be centering around trans women and trans men. So I have Sofia is one of my guests on the show. And of course, I have Erin, who's my co host for tonight. So let's go ahead and say hi to everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
So I want to center around trans women at the moment until Victor comes, if he comes. So I first want to start off with a quick story about a friend of mine I grew up with. We grew up in elementary and middle school. He was trans, and I remember growing up and feeling I accepted him for who he was. And to me, that's such a big thing because it's like, wow, like how at that age was I able to accept that? So, I mean, to me, it's just amazing to see just from that early age, just seeing what that looked like and now seeing how it's blossomed into, different movements now versus in the past. I mean, I don't remember hearing anything about that. You might tell me different, Sofia, but like back in like the 90s and stuff, I didn't hear a lot of support. A lot of people were giving him a lot of pushback. Obviously, the school, a lot of pushback, the parents, a lot of pushback. So I was basically his only like positive outlet, and I hope one day that I'll be able to meet him again because we lost touch. But yeah, I start off with that just because I want people to kind of think and just think, okay, like these are people, you know, these are human beings, and I think people come in already with their biases, already with their prejudices when they come on the show, or watch the show and they'll leave comments. Like, no, you need to come in, watch the show with an open mind and an open heart, because at the end of the day, everybody is a human being. Like that's just keep it there, So I want to just get that disclaimer out there before I start seeing crazy on my comments, because I will quickly delete them. So don't play with me. So yeah. So again, I want to center this around trans women, and the beautiful Sofia has graced us with her presence. So I definitely want to ask, the first thing I want to ask you, Sofia, is first, let's ask like something light, like what do you do for a living? Oh, you're on mute.
Of course I am. So yes, I am a community organizer here in San Antonio. I work for the Text Organizing Project. I am the statewide healthcare organizer. So I work for to ensure we fight for better indigent healthcare system, which is the low-income county healthcare that we have in every county in the state. A lot of people are not aware that they have it. So if you don't know if you have a county indigent healthcare system, please look it up. You more than likely have one. We're fighting for Medicare expansion, being that I'm in Texas, right? And of course, single payer, which is our long time goal. We want to make sure that everybody has access to healthcare free at the moment of service without the fear of having to pay for rent or choose a medication or having to pay for a bill and go to see a doctor, right? So our goal is to make sure that everybody has healthcare, and it doesn't matter what race, what gender, what background you come from, or immigration status. Everyone who's in the United States should have the right to see a doctor. So that's what I do, right, in San Antonio. And I've been doing my job for around 2 years with TOP. I've been doing advocacy on healthcare and environmental justice for around 6 years.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
That's awesome. and in the community doing your thing. Like, that's just
Right.
amazing to me. I know. Awesome.
That is very awesome.
So at what point in your life as a child, or whenever you felt you started to feel like, or, when did you feel that you were a woman or a girl? I'm not sure at what age you felt.
A woman. It's okay. So ever since I remember, right, I never saw myself as a boy. I always saw myself as a woman or as a little girl, right? Like when I remember, like one of my first memories is 4 years old, spinning around. We used to have the syndicate shows of Wonder Woman. I grew up in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, right? So it was in Spanish, and my dream was to be her, right? So I remember since very little running around with a belt and underwear and boots with a t-shirt and just spinning around, like thinking that I was Wonder Woman, right? And so it was always that was something that I always felt, that I always knew who I was, right? Like I remember growing up, playing with my sister's Barbies. I have my middle sister who is 5 years older than me, and we used to play neighbors and hang around drinking coffee and talk about our husbands being at work. And I was 5, 6 years old, so it was always in my head. I always knew I was a girl, right? It was until I went to school and I realized that I was not like the other children, right? Yeah. And even though it was, like you said, it was difficult, I did not know really about being transgender. The only thing that you hear is either you're gay or you're lesbian, or you're straight, right? Like there's nothing in between. Especially around the 80s, the 90s, there was really no information. So I feel like these times are super amazing for folks who are trans, especially trans kids, because they're able to see themselves with us on TV. Like the only thing that we were able to see on TV, at least in Mexico, it was drag queens, right? Like drag shows. There was a very big drag artist, his name was Francis, right? Who used to come out and on Sunday on one of the big shows, and you're like, maybe, but not really. That's not what I wanted to.
Yeah.
But it was always, I always felt this way. So it's nothing. The only thing really that changed was my hair got longer and I grew boobs. But that was the
Oh, that's so cool. So when you found out, not find out, but when you decided to reveal yourself, when was that moment when you decided, I'm no longer this pronoun, I am now this pronoun? And then how was that transition as far as getting people to say your pronouns? Because that's hard,
Yes. I mean, I still have difficulty with my family sometimes on holidays, right, where they still try to call me by my dead name. And but that's another story. Ever since high school, again, I was always very feminine, and I never, even though I wasn't trans or I wasn't presenting myself as a woman, I was always very feminine. So since high school, I started to be referred as she, right? And so when I came to the United States and I heard a lot of folks, a lot of trans folks telling me their story on high school and how they were bullied, right? To me, that was a disconnect, because yes, I was bullied, but I was bullied because I was fat. I wasn't bullied because I was feminine, or I wasn't bullied because I was female presenting, right? I was bullied because I was short and I was fat, even though I'm no longer short, and Ariane can tell you that.
Yeah, she's pretty and not fat. Yeah.
But like in high school, I was a nerd. I was into books. I began hanging out with the jocks and the cheerleaders, and so I was very accepted in high school. It was when I came to the United States and I started living with my aunt, who was very conservative, right? And she started telling me, why are you plucking your eyebrows? Why are you shaving your legs? Like those are things that boys don't do. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm not a boy. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. And I ended up being kicked out of my house when I was 19, 20. I was living on the street. And at 21, I met I started living in this bad relationship. So you have to get in bad relationships sometimes just to survive, to have a roof under your head, right? But
Wow.
I had the opportunity to meet a trans woman who lived in that apartment complex, and she lived in an apartment with other trans women there. So I started hanging out with them, and they pretty much um, showed me the ropes, right, and took me to
Yeah.
the doctor. And that's when I started my transition. I was working for a um, telemarketing service here in San Antonio. I'm pretty sure you know West Telemarketing. And so one day I showed up as a boy, and the next day I showed up as Sofia, and I never went back. And as I was afraid at the beginning of being harassed or maybe being met with violence or bullying, but I was very well accepted. A lot of folks I remember being on the elevator and one of the guys is like, "Oh my God, finally you can dress up the way that so it matches your voice." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks, I guess."
Were you offended by that, or?
At the moment, I wasn't. I was like, because to me, it wasn't an offense. It was more like you finally look the way that you sound and the way that you act, right? Like you're
Yeah,
finally
yeah,
coming to yourself.
yeah.
So it was more like validation, right? Like I am a
Gotcha.
woman. I am a woman, and he noticed it before. I mean,
Yeah.
he didn't hear me, nothing like that. But it was like he noticed, and it was not just him. It was a lot of folks who were on my training class who were pretty supportive about my transition.
Oh,
That is good. It's like a
that,
sense
But
of
it was raggedy though.
acceptance. Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you, it was raggedy. I had the worst makeup. I had this red fried wig that I had bought at the secondhand store. So, but I felt fabulous because I was finally me, like it was finally the person who I knew I was since I was little.
yeah. Wow. That's awesome. And it's good to feel, I'm sure that felt amazing to feel validated by somebody, you know? I think that's so important. There's a friend of mine who was going to be on the show, but I guess he wasn't able to make it. He, at the time, was transitioning during our work, like during his employment. So at first we were calling him by his maiden name, by his
Birth name.
birth name, right? And then when he was making the transition, now we were calling him Victor, and we had to change the pronouns, and it was really interesting because at the time everyone seemed very for it, and we were all good, but I think the customers, that's where I noticed there was a disconnect, because and if he was here he would probably say the same thing, just because he was pregnant at the time when he was making his transition, so you can imagine how difficult that was, right? So there was that situation, and having people tell, "Oh no, you're a woman, no, oh okay," like that whole situation was, I'm sure, very difficult for him, but I can't speak for him. That's why I was hoping he would be here to talk about that, because I thought that was really interesting. um, but uh, but yeah, I think it's just amazing your bravery to go from, especially in an environment where, like you say, you could be met with violence,
Yeah.
or fired, or I've heard of people getting fired, like
Yeah.
just straight
Same
up,
here.
like, and of course they gloss it up
With
as
no
something else.
explanation at all.
And it
Yeah.
happened, right? Like
Mhm.
before I changed my name, because I didn't stay at West Telemarketing forever, right? So like I couldn't change my name because the process of changing your name is 150, at least in Texas, it's $150. And if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't have that much money to go change your name. And I remember applying for cab company, I'm not gonna say the name, a cab company here. And I was having this interview with them, with the manager who was a man, right? And the guy was like, "Oh my God, you're so pretty. I love your smile. You have the smile of an angel, blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
Like he was blatantly just like hitting on me. And then he's like, "I think you'd be a great addition to our team. Can I have your ID and your social security?" And I was like, "Oh
Mm.
shit." right? I had to change my name. So I had to present my identification and my social security with my birth given name, right? And you could just see the change on his face, who went from like, hey, to wait a minute,
Yeah.
right? And so he tells me they were gonna call me the next day. So they called me the next day just to tell me that I wasn't, that I didn't get the position, right? And when they called me in to pay me for the day, because I ended up working for one day before I got fired, they put their contract worse so they wouldn't get in trouble with the law. And when I went to talk to a lawyer in San Antonio, because Texas said at will state, or we have a right to work state, we couldn't really do nothing against the discrimination that I faced at this job, right? And it wasn't the only job. I used to work for another telephone company whose there was another trans woman, and she used to be harassed. I mean, I was lucky to look the way that I look and to be able to navigate in the straight cis world without being as much as harassed or being, as we say on our community, clocked, right? But I've worked with trans women who you could tell they were trans women, right? Nothing against them at all. They were amazing people, but the people who work with them, they were assholes, and they would go to HR and say there's a man in the bathroom when one of them would use the restroom, right, in order to get them in trouble, right?
Terrible.
I saw that type of harassment, right? And I would question myself, am I doing enough for my community? Or should I continue living stealth because it's helping me navigate to this cis heteronormal world in which otherwise I wouldn't have the opportunity that I have right now, right? Like of moving up the ladder, which I do regret it. I regret not speaking up, but I also, at the time I was 24, 25, and I was afraid, like a Latina with a heavy accent. And then on top of that, you're trans. And so the little opportunities I was able to get, I didn't want to squander them or stand up and then losing my job, right? Because at the end of the day, it was my survival as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, wow.
Makes sense, and it's understandable at the end of the day, because there's not just one thing that's being affected. There's different facets of that that's being affected. So it does put you in a position of conflict where, okay, I do want to stand up for this and I do want to do this, but how do I manage to do this and not lose my job? How do I have the confidence to attack this situation without any type of retaliation or repercussions? So no, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and even with a tattoo, I mean, a lot of folks did not know that I was trans, right? And I was able to get promotions, which otherwise, if being trans would have prevented me from getting, right? Like there were many, even after you left, Ariane, there were some folks who were trans who came in to work, and I did everything possible because I became eventually the scheduling supervisor, and I did everything possible to make sure that they had their name on their email instead of their given name. That's their preferred name to be on their email, and call them by the proper pronoun. And I will make sure that they were comfortable in the environment that I was in charge of, right?
That's amazing. And
that is
that you made that safe space for them. That's so important, you know. And you know, to switch gears, how was dating for you?
Definitely a switch of gears.
Yes. Woo! Wow. Let's see, now I'm nervous.
No, if you don't feel comfortable, it's
okay. It's been like a hit and miss, right? Like as an adult, and when the internet finally started coming, I'm 44 years old.
Talking about. Yeah.
Well, when the internet finally came on and those dating sites started popping up, it became much more easier for me to actually start trying to find relationship, right? Like if you go to a bar, you're not gonna find the man of your life to begin with, right? And Um, and again, because of the way that I looked, I didn't have good luck on the trans positive bars because people would think that I was either a gay with my lesbian lover, which I was very good friends with a very good friend of mine. Her name is Leanne, right? And she was very butchy, and they were like, they must be together. They must be living together. I'm like, no, I'm into boys. What are you talking about? But they didn't have the idea, so I either rely on friends of mine trying to introduce me with to other boys, or like when the internet came, finally started trying to date on the internet. I have a boyfriend now for around 10 years that I met online on a trans dating site, and it became much easier for me because again, if I was putting gas and I will be like, hey, you're pretty, what's your name? And I'm like, I have a boyfriend, like get away from me. Because I didn't want to disclose to them, right? Like you don't know how people are going to react. You don't know the type of violence that you may encounter if you tell them, I'm sorry, I'm trans, right? And I mean, before I remember giving my phone number to this guy and the guy calling me and I did tell him and he freaked, right? So and this was on the phone. I was like, I'm not going to tell him in person. I'm not trying to tell him over the phone just because I don't know how he's going to react. And he
Wow. Yeah. And I bring that up because of the different things that have happened in our news with, you know, Black trans women being killed by, you know, Black men or, you know, or whatever man it was, but you know, because there's different stories. But, you know, to me, it's just so heartbreaking because it's like, I think they met that violence because of obviously disclosing who they are, you know, and to me, it's just disgusting to sit and kill somebody over that. To me, that you should be under the jail for that because that's that's to me unacceptable. You know?
I also think it has a lot to do with like the shame, right? Like we keep on putting not only on men, but anybody who dates trans folks, right? I remember I was trying to go out with this guy, and he, a friend of mine was staying with me in my apartment, and he came to visit or to wait for me because you know we girls take longer than we tell them. Come in at 9, we're ready at 9:30, right? So I remember I told them, let me finish getting ready so we can go. When I came out of the bathroom, the guy was gone, and I asked my roommate what happened. She goes, I don't know. I just asked him, so are you gay? So when we start shaming people for, like, I don't consider myself to be gay. I don't consider my boyfriend to be gay, right? Like my boyfriend is a straight guy who is in love with a heterosexual transgender woman. I just happen to be transgender, but it doesn't make me less of a woman, right? So to ask those type of questions could either trigger a man to become insecure or unsure of their masculinity and react in violence, right? A lot of the times that a lot of the violence that we see within the trans community, it usually happens with men who have relationship with trans women or with men who are trans attracted, right? But because of society tells them what you're doing is wrong, or you're not a man for dating a trans woman, they become either ashamed of showing their love for the trans woman or the trans community, or being openly trans amorous, right? And react with anger, react with fear, and react with fear of being ridiculed, right? And it causes them, or it prompts them to then react in violence, right? Which is very prevalent in our community. I mean, I myself was in a relationship with the guy. We went out, and his friend find out that I was trans, so he kept on calling me man. And the guy felt very threatened, and he ended up driving into an empty parking lot where he beat me up, and I had to run in order to. Yeah, that was when I was working for a cab company. And the next day, because I went back when I changed my name for the cab company, and they hired me with no problems.
I love that you did that. What?
But he did beat me up on an empty lot where I was fearful for my life, right? And it was a guy that I was having a relationship with.
Wow.
That is very scary.
What do you think that's more cultural, like as far as that type of stigma? Because I think, do you think, I know in our community, Black community, there is a stigma. It unfortunately is still there when it comes to being gay or lesbian. It's
Right.
still not totally acceptable. So in my culture, or me and Arian's culture, that's still a thing. So I'm sure in Hispanic culture, it's pretty much the same, you would say, or would it be
Yes.
worse? What do you think?
In Latino culture, it's pretty much the same as I mean, there is different religions, but it's like the Catholic religion is super prevalent, right? Like the machismo and the macho idea that
Yeah,
comes with the cultural Latino, or with that comes with the Latino culture, right? Prevents men from actually saying like, yes, I am transamorous, or yes, I'm attracted to a trans folk, whether it's women or men or whatever, right? So it also comes with the shame of not being completely open or not being completely truthful of who you are or who you're attracted to, right? So I feel, even though in the United States, unfortunately, I see most of my trans sisters being killed being Black, right? I feel like in Mexico, we have the same type of violence against trans women precisely because of the same type of culture.
yeah,
Whether it's um, in Mexico or Latino is more Catholic, and here is still religious, right? Like a
mhm,
Baptist or Methodist or whatever religion it is that you're practicing is much more against um, LGBTQ or against our rights or being able to be attracted to us. And for some reason, and which I don't understand why, white folks seems to be more open about that.
interesting.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure, and I think like I feel there's so many different things that could play a part in it, right? It's not just culture. I think it's also media. I think it's music. I think music is a big one. I think
Yeah.
there's just not enough representation of people in the trans community that are doing music or doing movies. I think that
TV
would
shows. Yeah.
help to
Hmm.
kind of spread more awareness where people will be more accepting, because I think that could be an issue. What do you both think?
I agree, and although we have a couple of good
Sprinkled in there.
singers,
Sprinkle, yeah,
Kim Petras,
yeah,
she's an amazing singer who's trans. She started transitioning. She was like 14 years old, and
yeah,
she has this amazing voice. But a lot of people don't know she's trans. I mean, you look at her, she has this tiny little waist. She doesn't look anything like the idea, not what we're supposed to look like the idea that a lot of people think of when they think of trans. They think of us as masculine, right? With a 5 o'clock
yeah.
shadow,
Mhm.
with a prevalent Adam's apple and a hyper masculine voice. And I think, I don't know if you've watched the movie Disclosure that Laverne Cox actually helped produce, which is
Oh,
in Netflix. And if you haven't, like I will suggest you watch it.
write
As
it down right now.
about trans representation in media, which we're just talking about, right? And
Yeah,
how it changed, right? And it shifted, and how at the beginning, like when movies were coming out, and all the way until the 80s, 90s, every representation that we had on trans folks were bad representations, or we were the butt of every joke, right? Or we were the criminals, kind of like one of the persons or one of the trans women in that documentary said that when she disclosed to her friend that she was trans and she was thinking of a transition, and her friend responded, so like Buffalo Bill from Silence of the Lambs. So
wow,
Wow,
exactly, like
that's
we don't
crazy
have
comparison.
positive
yeah,
representation, right? And now you see on TV shows like Supergirl, we have Dreamer, which is a trans girl who is a superhero,
hmm,
right? And I'm like, I'm
yeah,
living for it because I finally see positive representation in
yeah,
a national platform, which is the WC, right? Like
yeah,
what, like how did we come from there to here?
yeah,
And then I don't care how we got here. The point is we got here, and we need to take advantage of the situation. And I was pretty hopeful when I saw not only that, they were talking about trans violence, and her roommate, the person who plays her roommate is a Black trans woman.
Mhm.
And the episode was about a guy doing violence against her, and she taking quote unquote revenge to avenge her best friend, right? So I thought it was great to talk and finally put it on a big platform about the violence that our community is facing, especially trans women of color.
Yeah. So what can be something that could stop this? Stop the violence between, with Black trans women? What can we do? Um, what can each community do? Or, what can we personally do to make this stop? Or, what do you think?
I think the most important thing is be super supportive, not just on trans women, but also trans loving people, and not just men, right? Like there's a lot of women, female who are trans, who have relationship with female to male trans men, right? So it's not only be an ally of the community, but be supportive of anyone that you know. And if somebody tells you, hey, I feel like I'm trans attracted and I don't know what to do and I'm ashamed of it, tell them, don't be ashamed. Like you said in the entrance, Kim, we are people, we are normal, we are not predators. We are
Right.
going to the bathroom to use the bathroom. We are not there to attack anybody. If anything, we feel sometimes like we might be attacked just for going to the bathroom, right? So we are not the perpetrators, we're the victims. And we need to understand that it's not only allyship and fighting against bathroom bills, which is super important, but it's ensuring that we have the same protections when it comes to working, protection when it comes to housing, protections when it comes to healthcare, and protection when it comes to living a regular life with a lover, with a partner who genuinely loved us, right? Rather than shaming those folks. In the UK, there was a Black man who posted on Facebook saying that he was trans attractive, he was so in love with his trans girlfriend, and he received a lot of pushback from the community that he ended up killing himself, right?
Wow.
Yes, that happened last year. So let's make sure that we're not only being allies, but we are not protecting, because I don't want you to be the protectors, but I want you to be the shoulder there for folks to feel comfortable to tell you, hey, this is the way that I'm feeling. What can we do? Or this is the way that I'm feeling. Don't judge me, right? Like another thing, don't judge. Don't judge. Everybody's different. Everybody has their own they're going to have their own opinions, but it's best if we continue telling them they're nothing different. They're just another set of people.
Yeah.
Agreed. I was going to pretty much say the same thing, but you kind of said it nicely in a neat little package. But yeah, basically advocating and awareness. Because I do, not that this should be an excuse, but I do think people lack a severe amount of knowledge. And I feel like when you have an open mind and an open heart, as Kim stated, that makes it possible for you to accept or take in the education and the knowledge. Because if you're closed-minded, you're not even going to try to accept that.
No.
But then while having that knowledge, if you're going to advocate for anything else, this is right along that list of things you can advocate and support,
Exactly.
Or like you said, have someone to lean on, or you see something happening to a trans person and you can help in any way, help.
Yeah.
Or, but I feel like too many of us like turn a blind eye, or that's not happening to me. Or that's not anyone I know,
Exactly.
So definitely advocacy and definitely awareness.
And that's another thing. A lot of folks do not even know that they might know trans folks, right? Because sometimes we do try to live incognito or like under the radar in order to be able to survive, right? So a lot of people is like, I don't know anybody who's trans. You probably do. They just don't feel comfortable enough to tell you that they are, right?
What is that whole phrase they say sometimes? The 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Like I wholeheartedly think that can fall into this.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Exactly. Like, what is it? Like 10% of the population of the United States is trans. So you do definitely know somebody who. There's no other way around.
But I think it has to do with it. People have this image of what they believe a trans man or trans woman should be. And if that person does not fit within that box, then they're not, then I don't know any trans people. No.
Exactly.
Yeah. You
It,
do.
That
that's
we
exactly
have to act like this and have
it.
like no, not all of us look the same. Just like all
Yeah.
Latinos, we all Latinos don't look the same. Black folks, we all don't look the same. Trans, we all don't look the same. We all different, and we have different desires, right? And different.
Right.
A lot of folks were like, "How can a trans woman be attracted to another woman?" Well, there is gender and there is sexuality, right? Like a
Yeah.
trans person could be attracted to a woman if they are indeed gay, right? Like there's trans gay folks who are there are males, trans males who have relationship with gay folks because they are trans gay. I'm a trans heterosexual woman, but we all have our different lives. We all have our
Yeah.
different needs, and that doesn't make us any different, or that doesn't make us any weirder, or that
Yeah.
doesn't make us a freak,
Or,
right? Like just
right. Or
because,
any less important.
Yeah.
exactly.
It's exactly, it's preference. And I think it kind of goes back to even sexual preference. Like some people like whatever feet or whatever, right? Like there's so many different, right? Like so many different fetishes. You're like, wait, what? Like, but again, it's a preference. And you can kind of frown your eye, you can kind of like put your nose up at people, but it's like that's what makes us so different. That's what makes us human, because we're not all the same. And I think it goes even with color. Well, Black people aren't in this little box. We're all different.
Right. There's different variations within us too.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Asian people are not all the same. Like it kind of goes in. It's kind of intersectionality going there, right? Like
Yeah.
And it's frustrating when I hear that. When I hear people like give out some kind of crazy stereotype about trans or Black or it's like.
Mm-hmm. I thought y'all all like rap music
or something.
Yeah.
I thought all of you like
said that.
ranchero songs, and I'm like, no.
Right. No.
It's frustrating, but again, one of my guy friends was like, "Well, this guy said this to me," and I'm like, you know what? Like, you can try and like, talk people down and debate people till the cows come home, but if people are not open to hearing what you have to say, like you're literally spinning your wheels. I said,
That's key, right?
And walk away because
You're literally talking to a wall.
Yeah, they're not open.
And beware of the ones who keep on asking you for proof. Tell me, how are trans folks is not real, blah, blah, blah. Tell me where it says, well, science tells you this and this and that, right? Like based on science, we know that trans women's brains are equal as the female brain. We know that trans men brains are equal to the male brains. I don't believe that. Well, here is the proof. This is the studies that are being done. So there's people that you're never gonna convince. Right?
Yeah, because even then, I don't feel like I should have to prove that to you regardless.
Exactly.
If I'm going to take the time to educate myself about a topic or a situation, you need to do the same thing. Yep. You know what I mean? So at the end of the day, I'm with you on that, Sophia, but at the end of the day, those kind of people, I'm not going to sit here and try to prove something to you.
Yeah.
Just on another subject, but not to go too much into it, it's like proving that racism doesn't exist. So no, we're not going to sit here and try to prove something to you when you can just take the time to educate yourself.
Exactly. It is not.
That's why I'm done with
you. It is not our job to educate and uneducate it, right? If you really want to learn, you have a world of information at your fingertips.
Yep.
Right?
Agreed.
If you really are willing to learn. I've had friends who I've lost, particularly during that, and not just this year, right? When Michael Brown was killed, and where was it? Where Corey Bush is, and it's living my mind. But when the protest of Black Lives Matter, and when Obama was still president, was going on, I lost a lot of friends, right? Because they kept on saying, no, how dare you, it's all lives matter. How dare you? We cannot say all lives matter unless oppressed lives matter. Right now, Black folks are being killed, so Black lives have to matter before the rest of our lives matter, right? And it's the same. I've lost a lot of folks. Somebody told me, I don't think I can go back to your organization because your organization wants to lift up Black and brown folks. And as a white person, I don't feel like I have a place there. Now that I have privilege and now that I'm racist, and I'm like, the moment that you say now that I'm racist, all I'm hearing is racist.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
And why should we have to make a safe space for you? Y'all have had a safe space literally for centuries. Latinos, Latinas, and African American men and women, we don't have that safe space. It's, we don't. So this is why we are intentionally trying to make a space of that nature, because we don't have it. This is why we can sit here and say we're proud Hispanic men and women and proud Black men and women, because it's like if no one tells you that, you want to uplift yourself, right?
Exactly.
So it's just funny to me that that person made that particular statement when they can go anywhere in the world. They don't have to worry or have that fear about their life. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would love to continue talking because like the talk is great. It's amazing. But we're gonna have to bring it to a close. Again, thank you, Sofia, for coming on the show. It's been a delight.
Yeah,
I feel like we could talk for like another 2 hours, honestly.
Easily.
Real. And, Arian, thank you. You're always on my show, and I always appreciate your thoughts, as always.
I love you, girl.
Right? Thank you.
All right, ladies. I'm going to go ahead and end the show. Please stay. All right, friends out there. I say, all right, friends. I say that to my kids all the time. So thank you again for being on the show, for watching Black and Rowdy. Tune in next week. Bye.